Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Hello again from our Mumbai studios. Our lead story tonight comes from Moscow. Putin's chef turned critic may be dead. That's Yevgeny Prigozhin. He's said to have died in a plane crash. Was he killed or was this an accident? Either way, it won't be the first time a Putin critic has died under mysterious circumstances. We'll tell you about other such cases. In South Africa, the Brics has been expanded. We'll tell you about the new members that are joining and what does it mean. After wheat, rice and onions, India may ban sugar exports as well. We'll discuss why. After yesterday's historic landing, what is the Chandrayaan doing on the moon now? Will Imran Khans' conviction be overturned in Pakistan? Why is there a traffic jam on the Panama Canal? What happened at the US Republican presidential debate? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Japan begins releasing wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear plant. A furious China bans all seafood imports from Tokyo. Japan insists the water is harmless and the UN backs it. It's been 12 years since the Fukushima nuclear disaster. North Korea's second attempt to launch its spy satellite fails. Their first one crashed just 3 months ago. Kim Jong-un wants a military eye in the sky to counter the US in the region. In Pakistan, the owner and operator of the cable car have been arrested. They're accused of ignoring safety warnings. The cable car dangled over a ravine for hours. All 8 people on board, including 6 school children, were eventually rescued. India's chess genius, Pragnananda, falters at the last hurdle. Carlsen finally clinches the elusive Chess World Cup title. Pragnananda sets his sights on the 2024 Candidates Tournament. In it, the top 8 in the world will fight for supremacy. And get ready for the world's first AI Safety Summit. Britain will host the 2-day event in November. The focus will be on developing artificial intelligence safely. It comes amid warnings from experts of the dangers of AI without regulation. Winston Churchill had a great definition for Russia. He called it a riddle wrapped in a mystery, inside an enigma. For a change, he was right. Yet another mystery has emerged from Russia, the mystery of a plane crash. And not just any plane. This is the plane that was allegedly carrying Yevgeny Prigozhin. That's right, the chief of Wagner. He's currently presumed dead. Now, before we dive in, let me tell you something. This is anything but a straightforward story. This is a story playing out in the shadows. So keeping that in mind, let's begin. The story begins on Wednesday. A private jet was flying from Moscow to St. Petersburg. 10 people were on board, 3 crew and 7 passengers. One of them was listed as Yevgeny Prigozhin. But was he actually on the flight? We don't know yet. Either way, the plane crashed just north of Moscow. Russia says all 10 people on board are dead. And how did the plane crash? Again, we don't know yet. All we have is this video. Take a look.
Пиздец, это беспилотник. Сбили, бабахнуло в 2 раза, взорвалось, падает. Ты посмотри, падает.
The plane was cruising at 28,000 feet. All systems were normal. Then suddenly it began to drop. In half a minute, the plane plummeted 8,000 feet and then it crashed. This was the scene at the crash site. A mangled fuselage, a lot of debris and a ball of fire. Some local residents did see the crash. Listen into their account.
I hear an explosion or a bang. Usually, if an explosion happens on the ground, then you get an echo. But it was just a bang and I looked up and saw white smoke. One wing flew off in one direction and the fuselage went like that. And then it glided down on one wing. It didn't nosedive, it was gliding.
What is the Kremlin saying about this? Well, nothing so far, but Russia's aviation agency has launched an investigation. A team of officials has visited the crash site. It's all very low profile. Even Russia's state media has been measured. They have made just passing references to the crash and Prigozhin. Fishy, I know. This is a man who rebelled against Putin in June this year. He ordered his soldiers to march to the capital. He was abusing generals in public. So why is Russia downplaying his presumed death? Could the Russian state be involved? The chronology is certainly suspicious. First there was a rebellion, then there was a deal, and now there is a mysterious plane crash. Social media accounts linked to Wagner are blaming Moscow for what has happened. They say the Russian air defenses shot down the plane. If so, how do we confirm it? Ideally, there would be an independent investigation. Unfortunately, this is Russia, so take the probe results with a pinch of salt. The United States is also blaming Putin for the crash. This is what President Joe Biden said.
I don't know for a fact what happened, but I'm not surprised.
Do you believe?
There's not much that happens in Russia that Putin's not behind, but I don't know enough to know the answer.
So many questions and very few answers. Like, what was Prigozhin doing in Moscow? He and his fighters had been exiled to Belarus. So why did he return? Also, why would Putin kill him now? And what happens to the remaining Wagner fighters? Only the Kremlin can answer these questions, but right now they're tight-lipped. Prigozhin was last seen in this video. He's seen in full combat gear. He's also holding up a rifle. This video was posted by the Wagner group on Monday. The location is somewhere in Africa. Prigozhin said his troops were fighting ISIS and Al-Qaeda. He said he was making Africa more free.
Температура плюс 50. Все как мы любим.
Wagner PMC conducts reconnaissance and search actions, making Russia even greater on all continents and making Africa more free. Justice and happiness for the African people. We are making life a nightmare for ISIS and Al-Qaeda and other bandits.
Well, here's the thing. For most people in Russia, this plane crash is not surprising. Neither is Prigozhin's presumed death. What was surprising was what happened in late June. Putin decided to strike a deal with Wagner. Instead of crushing the rebellion, he chose negotiation, and that is not Putin's style. His rule is not based on accommodating dissent or cutting deals with political rivals. His rule is based on being unchallenged. So in the Putin playbook, Prigozhin had to go. If not in June, then later. But is that what happened? Well, I guess we'll never know. This plane crash will probably end up being another Russian mystery. But politically, what does it mean? It means that Putin is very much in control of the Russian establishment. All this talk of leadership trouble is unfounded. Because remember, this is not just any other critic. This is a man with 25,000 soldiers under his command, a man who was once called Putin's chef, a man who was still useful to Russia in far-off battlefields, and more importantly, a man who was popular in Russia. Just look at these pictures. People in St. Petersburg are lighting candles and offering flowers for Prigozhin. But in Russia, popularity does not help you, neither does a private militia. What helps you is loyalty to Putin. As long as Prigozhin was Putin's chef, he was safe. When the chef became the butcher, his plane crashed. So Prigozhin defied Putin, and now he's said to be dead. But this is not the first such case in Russia. Putin's critics always seem to meet the same fate. They're either in a crash, or they fall out of a window, or they are mysteriously poisoned. So is this all just strange coincidence, or is there more to the picture? Either way, one thing is for sure. If you challenge Putin, you have a target on your back. Our next report tells you about the curious deaths of Putin critics.
The Soviet Union fell in 1991. In Moscow, it was a time of great turmoil. Russian intelligence was at a crossroads. The war that they dedicated their lives to was now over, and they were left to rebuild what was left. Sergei Skripal was one such intelligence officer, and so was Vladimir Putin. The two men had very little in common, but they chose very different paths. Putin went on to become the president of Russia, but Skripal, he joined the West. He spied for them. It was something Putin could never forget, betraying your own country. It's something he talked about a lot too. Skripal was found on a bench in England, foaming from his mouth. He was poisoned. He survived, but all the signs pointed to Vladimir Putin. The West accused Russia of a hit job. However, Kremlin wasn't the only one. Take Alexei Navalny, for example. He's one of Putin's most vocal critics, Russia's most prominent opposition leader. he challenged the Russian president and his life took a turn for the worse. Navalny was on a trip to Siberia in 2020. He was on a plane. That's when he suddenly fell ill. He was poisoned with Novichok, a Soviet-made nerve agent. The same thing used to poison Sergei Skripal. Navalny survived the attack, but he remains in jail. While Navalny and Skripal may have survived, some of Putin's critics were not so lucky, like Alexander Litvinenko, a former KGB agent and outspoken critic of Putin. He died in 2006 after drinking green tea laced with polonium-210. It's a rare and potent radioactive isotope. Britain claimed that Putin may have approved the killing, but the Kremlin once again denied any role in it. Then there was Boris Nemtsov. He was a Kremlin critic, also a former deputy prime minister. In 2015, he was shot dead while walking back home. He had slammed Putin's annexation of Crimea, so obviously the Kremlin was blamed. And it doesn't stop there. 2022 wasn't a great year for Russian oligarchs. First, there was the war. And then there were mysterious deaths, like that of Ravil Maganov. He was the chairman of oil company Lukoil. In September, he died after falling from a hospital window. Same for Pavel Antov. He was a Russian politician and millionaire. He too died in December after falling out of a window from a hotel. Circumstances surrounding these falls remain unclear. Now, Kremlin has denied any responsibilities for all of these deaths and poisonings. But it's a curious coincidence that people who cross the Kremlin and Putin often meet an untimely end. Prigozhin was no different. Of course, there's no evidence linking any of these deaths to Putin. But like they say, Putin's critics have an uncanny habit of dropping dead.
Diplomacy is like a game of tug-of-war. Often one side overpowers the other, but sometimes it ends in a draw. That's the story of the Brics summit this year. There was a lot of back and forth, 11th-hour negotiations, and a broad range of differing opinion. There were some interesting moments too, like this one. That's Prime Minister Modi with President Xi Jinping. We don't know what they're talking about. Reports say both leaders had a brief exchange in Johannesburg. This was just before today's news conference, where the host, South Africa, made this announcement.
We have decided to invite the Argentine Republic, the Arab Republic of Egypt, the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates to become full members of BRICS. The membership will take effect from the 1st of January 2024. Thank you very much.
That was the biggest outcome from today, an agreement on expansion. 6 more countries have got an invite to join BRICS: Saudi Arabia, Iran, the UAE, Egypt, Argentina and Ethiopia. When will they be admitted to BRICS? On the 1st of January 2024, and this is a significant feat. For a while now, the BRICS countries have been talking about expansion. They backed the idea publicly, but the members bickered over the process. The disagreements have been widely reported, including on this show. Broadly, the divisions were over 2 points: how many and how soon? How many new members should join, and at what pace should the BRICS expand? These were the points of debate. China and Russia pushed for sweeping changes. They wanted more members and they wanted them quickly. They wanted a bigger BRICS. But India and to some extent Brazil wanted to be more selective. They wanted to maintain some exclusivity. The host, South Africa, had received inquiries from more than 40 countries. They expressed an interest in joining BRICS. 40 countries. Out of these, 22 countries applied formally. So the pool of potential candidates was quite big. Ultimately, the group agreed upon 6 names. Right now, BRICS has 5 members: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. That's where it gets its name, BRICS. By next year, they will have 11 members. Today, BRICS economies represent 23% of the world's GDP and 42% of the world's population. The new BRICS will represent 36% of the world's GDP and 46% of the world's population. South Africa hosted the summit this year, And they were the last ones to join BRICS in the year 2011. So for 12 years, the group remained as is. Now, South Africa has played a key role in its expansion, and they say this is just the first phase. That's the term the South African president used, the first phase of expansion. So who's joining next and what for? Here's what the leaders of South Africa and Brazil had to say.
We have consensus on the first phase of this expansion process, and other phases will follow.
The relevance of BRICS is confirmed by the growing interest of other countries in joining our group.
So while the purpose and direction of BRICS is being debated, more and more countries want to join it. Prime Minister Modi said India will work with other BRICS aspirants.
Friends, BRICS का विस्तार एवं आधुनिकीकरण इस बात का संदेश है कि विश्व के सभी इंस्टीट्यूशंस को बदलते समय की परिस्थितियों के अनुरूप ढलना चाहिए.
What about Russia and China? They're thrilled about the expansion. Xi Jinping called the announcement historic. Putin congratulated the new members.
These new members provide a new starting point for BRICS cooperation and inject new impetus into the BRICS cooperation mechanism.
I would like to congratulate our new members who will work full scale next year. I would like to assure all colleagues that we will continue the work that we have started today to expand the influence of BRICS in the world.
Influence, that's what the BRICS is looking for. Its members placed a bet on two ideas, expansion and a BRICS currency. There's been some headway on expansion, but the BRICS currency is a long shot. Brazil's President Lula da Silva made a pitch for it. He found no takers. India refused to entertain the proposal. South Africa kept it out of the agenda. What the BRICS is discussing instead is using their own currencies for trade. That still remains a possibility. And what does that mean? It means ditching the US dollar and paying for goods in native currencies. The BRICS still wants to explore this idea. They will discuss it at the next summit. A bigger BRICS will boost the de-dollarization sentiment. One clear possibility is on the energy front. Some of the new members are the world's leading energy exporters, the likes of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, also Iran and Brazil. A few years back, it would have been difficult to imagine all these countries together in the same group. But the times have changed. Old divides are being bridged, and at BRICS, they could create new synergies. Most of the world buys energy in US dollars. The BRICS could choose to transact in alternative currencies, and that's just one scenario. It's still early days. We're yet to see the full impact of this expansion. Will it mend ties or make them worse? Now, there's no denying the fact that the Global South needs to work together. There is growing uncertainty, especially on the economic front. Food shortages are hurting economies, and India is bracing for impact. Inflation remains an area of concern. Prices of basic food items are still high, and India is being forced to take extreme measures. The list of export bans in India is growing. It started with wheat. India banned the export of wheat last year. Then some varieties of rice. Then onions. The latest addition to this is sugar. It could soon be on the same list, meaning India could soon ban the export of sugar too. A new report is out. It raises the likelihood of a complete and total ban on sugar exports. So far, India has been restricting sugar exports. The government set a quota for sugar mills, an export cap of 6.1 million tons. You could not export more than this. But now we are looking at the possibility of a total ban. So you save all the sugar output for the Indian market. When will the ban be implemented? If it is implemented, it should happen by October this year. And why is it necessary? Again, due to a shortfall in production. Two Indian states are the main hubs of sugar production, Maharashtra and Karnataka. Together, they produce more than half of India's total output of sugar. But this year, sugar production has taken a hit. The reason is the rainfall. It has been below average. Now, as you may know, sugar comes from sugarcane. It needs tons of water to grow. So when rainfall is patchy, production falls. What kind of deficit are we looking at this year? Experts have shared an estimate. They say sugar production could fall by 3.3%. So it is a double whammy. Inflation is high and production is low. Hence the need for an export ban. The goal is to keep supplies steady for the domestic market and to prevent prices from going up further. As of today, there are no shortages. The move will be out of an abundance of caution. Indian kitchens are already under pressure. Prices of many food items are soaring, like tomatoes, onions, potatoes, and pulses. They've all become more expensive. The last thing you want is for sugar to go out of control. Internationally, prices are fluctuating. 2 weeks back, sugar prices surged in the international market. Traders were concerned about supply. Thailand is the world's third largest sugar producer, but this year Thailand too has struggled. Their output fell by 31% this year. India is the world's second largest sugar exporter. If India bans exports, there's bound to be a shortage in the international market. Sugar prices will rise, but the Indian market will be insulated because of the export ban. You see, India, like we said, is already battling high inflation. In the month of July, it stood at 7.44%. That's the highest in 15 months and almost 4% higher than the RBI's comfort level. The RBI is the Reserve Bank of India, the country's central bank. Their inflation target is 4%. If it's at 4%, the RBI is okay with it. But right now, inflation is almost 8%. So urgent steps are necessary, but they may not be enough. Food shortages may become a long-term challenge for India. We are in the monsoon season. The rain has been uneven in many parts of the country. Farmers have fallen behind. This is the time they used to plant summer crops like rice, cotton, corn, soybean. This is when they plant it. But this time, farmers are sowing up to 40% less than normal. You can imagine the result. If they sow less, they'll reap a smaller harvest next year, and that could lead to more shortages. New Delhi realizes this. It's preparing for a prolonged battle against inflation. Reports say they're reallocating some budget funds. A war chest is being created to fight price rise. We're talking about reallocation to the tune of $12 billion. Where will the money be used? Well, there are multiple options like lowering the tax on fuel, easing import tariffs on cooking oil and wheat, and providing cheaper loans to the poor. Will it come to that? Will India set aside cash to cool inflation? As of last week, discussions were still on because inflation is a sensitive issue at the best of times. It's a very critical issue in an election year. What does hypocrisy look like? This picture is as close as you can get. Those are delegates of the OIC, that's the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and guess where they are? In Xinjiang. The same place where China has jailed Uyghur Muslims, almost 1 million of them. There are reports of torture, of human experiments, and of sexual abuse. Now, I know what you're thinking. Surely the OIC delegates were trying to raise awareness about what's happening there, to stand in solidarity with their fellow Muslims. Well, think again. These OIC delegates were in Xinjiang for a whole different reason, to give China a clean chit. First, some important information. The OIC has 57 member states spread over 4 continents. It claims to represent the Islamic world. It also claims to fight Islamophobia, but turns out conditions apply. Delegates from 25 OIC countries visited China last week. Their focus was on Xinjiang. The region has a population of 25 million, and around 11 million of them are Uyghur Muslims. Beijing has given this community of 11 million a choice: get brainwashed or get jailed. The world knows this. Many countries have declared the Uyghur crackdown a genocide, but the OIC delegation did not see any of that. They were busy ogling at the so-called development. It was classic Chinese propaganda. The OIC group visited the cities of Kashgar and Urumqi, also a village which is apparently famous for mushrooms. Now let me guess, it's grown using forced labor. The OIC team got a tour of a Uyghur residential community. They also visited some historic sites. After seeing all this, the delegates praised China. Listen to what Djibouti's envoy to the OIC had to say. We are very glad about what we saw. I hope this development will continue in this region and all parts of China. The Pakistani envoy went one step ahead. The visit to Xinjiang provided us with the opportunity to see the reality and will help to address the misconceptions attached with the region. Strange choice of words. Since when is the persecution of 1 million people a misconception? But then again, what else should we expect? Both Pakistan and Djibouti are submerged in Chinese debt. If Xi Jinping pointed at a dog and said, "This animal is a goat," both countries would probably nod their head. The OIC delegates also praised the so-called preservation of historical architecture. I'm surprised they found any. Reports say around 12,000 mosques have been destroyed in Xinjiang. If they are standing, they do not look like mosques. No domes, no minarets, and definitely no prayer calls. Is this what preservation looks like? We knew the OIC was ignoring China's abuses, but ignoring is one thing, endorsing is quite another. This is shameful for an organization that claims to represent Islam, that claims to fight Islamophobia. Just a quick reminder, these are the same countries that expelled ambassadors over the Quran burnings in Sweden. Their people attacked embassies. But in China, they're enablers of a 21st century genocide, and the reason is quite simple. It's money. Most of the Muslim nations are based in West Asia and North Africa. Their staple is oil. And who is the biggest buyer of oil? China. It makes up around 13% of global consumption. Another factor is trade. Look at the so-called leaders of the Islamic world. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Iran. China is their biggest trading partner. So what do these countries do? Well, until now, they ignored China's Uyghur genocide. I guess now they will start endorsing all of it. This episode shows the reality of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. They breathe fire when a Quran is burnt in Europe or when the Prophet is caricatured. They always have something to say about Kashmir, but they barely flinch at a genocide in China. The OIC does not represent Muslim interests anymore. It represents the hypocritical ruling elite. Yesterday, India achieved what no one has. Its scripted history. Hundreds of thousands of you watched it on Firstpost. Chandrayaan-3 successfully soft-landed on the moon in the southern polar region, making India the first country ever to reach this part of the lunar surface. This moment was greeted with celebrations across the country. The pride and excitement is still palpable. Now, the moon rover has taken its first steps, and with each step, it is leaving India's mark on the moon quite literally. It is roving around rocks and craters, gathering crucial data. But what really is this rover looking for? What does Chandrayaan-3 plan to achieve? Our next report tells you.
Confirmation of the safety of the landing site.
This was the moment when everything changed. Yesterday, the Chandrayaan-3 spacecraft successfully landed at the lunar South Pole. No country had ever achieved this feat before. We told you all about it. As scientists cheered and hugged each other, Prime Minister Narendra Modi waved the Indian flag
Let us all wait to hear
and declared this a victory cry of a new India.
ये क्षण अभूतपूर्व है। ये क्षण विकसित भारत के शंखनाद का है। ये क्षण नए भारत के जयघोष का है।
A victory cry indeed. That's why the euphoria is far from over. People are still celebrating. And why not? This is no mean achievement.
This happiness cannot be expressed in words. We are happy to our core as the hard work of our scientists has finally paid off. Today we have been successful in landing on the moon.
It's indeed a great achievement, and the cost, what they have achieved in the bare cost. In the Hollywood, the people, they make movies in that cost. So we have achieved in that cost entire project landing on the moon itself.
Indeed, the hard work of scientists have paid off. And now they've passed on the baton to their two teammates on the moon. We're talking about the two robots, a lander named Vikram and a rover named Pragyan. After the dust raised by the landing settled, panels on one side of the Vikram lander opened, and the Pragyan rover slid down to the lunar surface. Now the rover has taken its first steps on the moon. It's roaming around rocks and craters, gathering important data, and sending images like these back to Earth. The rover will move at a speed of 1 centimeter per second. With each step, it will leave India's mark on the moon. Not just metaphorically, but literally. It's imprinting the logo and emblem of the Indian Space Research Organization on the lunar surface. Both the lander and rover are carrying several scientific instruments. They intend to find out which minerals are present on the lunar surface, study the soil's chemical composition, discover what goes on both above and below the surface, and most importantly, they will hunt for water. According to scientists, huge craters in the southern lunar region hold ice, meaning they have water. Why is this a game changer? Because it could support human habitation on the moon. Help in generating oxygen for life could potentially be used for fuel, and also aid spacecrafts traveling to Mars and other destinations. This would be a major breakthrough, and while India is leading the charge, it intends to share its discoveries with the rest of the world.
Our moon mission is also based on the same human-centric approach. Therefore, this success belongs to all of humanity, and it will help moon missions by other countries in the future.
Chandrayaan 3, that is science data, it is not only for India, it is for the global scientists. So this data that the scientists will be using globally, and they will discover some new things from this data.
With the successful landing of Chandrayaan 3, India has already scripted history, but is far from resting on its laurels. With every step India's rover takes on the dark side of the moon, it will throw light on our understanding of it.
Our next story is from Pakistan. Their soap opera starring Imran Khan has a fresh twist, one that could get the former Prime Minister released from jail. Let me explain. Imran Khan's arrest was ordered by a trial court in Pakistan. So like most convicts, he appealed it both at the Supreme Court and the Islamabad High Court. Now on Wednesday, the Supreme Court of Pakistan took up his appeal. The Chief Justice seemed to be in Imran Khan's corner. Listen to what he said. Prima facie, the decision by the lower court contains defects. But we will not intervene at this stage, rather wait for the outcome of the High Court decision. Now this is big. The Chief Justice says the conviction was defective. So why isn't the court reversing it? Because the same case is also being heard by the Islamabad High Court. The Chief Justice says we'll wait for the High Court's order. Then we will take a call. Imran Khan supporters are calling this a big win. They feel the top court will reverse the conviction. But why not the High Court? Let's say it's more dicey. Imran Khan has accused the Islamabad High Court Chief Justice of bias. He wants all his cases transferred elsewhere, maybe Peshawar or Lahore. If the Chief Justice sticks to his words, the conviction could be reversed. What happens then? Well, the army has multiple options. Imran Khan's current conviction is under the Tosha Khana case for the gifts that he received as Prime Minister. He is accused of selling those state gifts. But it's not the only case. Imran Khan has more than 150 cases against him. So if this doesn't work out, the army can always use another one. In fact, the plan is already in motion. Today, an anti-terror court allowed the arrest and interrogation of Imran Khan. In which case? Well, you may remember an incident from May this year. That's when Imran Khan was first arrested. Thousands of his supporters rioted in response. They attacked the military commander's house in Lahore. Imran Khan is accused of instigating that, of plotting the attack on a military asset. So if not corruption, then something else. The army is not going to let Imran Khan walk out of jail, especially not before elections. But how long will this cycle continue? Will it go on until the army exhausts all 150 cases? I know it sounds absurd, but at this point, anything is possible in Pakistan. The army clearly did not expect this matter to escalate this much. They thought the arrest would be the end of it. But Imran Khan is getting support from unexpected quarters. First, it was the President of Pakistan. He denied signing bills that strengthened the army. And now it's the Chief Justice. Pakistan's ruling coalition has sensed a trend. Their de facto chief, Nawaz Sharif, has broken his silence. He says the top judiciary is trying to protect Imran Khan. Listen to this.
Today, the Chief Justice is trying to protect a man who is accused of stealing billions in multiple cases.
The former Chief Justice was eager to push me against the wall. The current Chief Justice is determined to save Imran Khan.
Now, I must say, Nawaz Sharif does not look like a convict out on medical bail. He looks like a politician eager to get back. But even that depends on many factors. Shehbaz Sharif says his brother Nawaz will face the law. And by law, he means the court. He will face the court. But if the courts cannot be trusted, how will Nawaz Sharif return? So Pakistan's political crisis is far from over. In fact, it's getting worse by the day. The president, Arif Alvi, is more emboldened. He has written a letter to Pakistan's chief election commissioner. The president says it is his duty to conduct elections within 90 days of the parliament being dissolved. And the parliament was dissolved on the 9th of August, so elections should be held by November. The president wants to meet the election commissioner and fix a date. But the poll body chief says, what's the point? Pakistan's outgoing government had amended the election laws. The new law says only the election commission can announce elections, not the president, only the election commission. So what trumps what? The constitution, which says the president should hold elections, or the new law, which empowers the election commission to do that? I'm guessing that's another job for the Supreme Court of Pakistan. What we're seeing is the implosion of a country's political system. The president is at war with the election commission, the Supreme Court is taking on the lower courts, and the caretaker government is clashing with the president. The only question is, when or if will the army lose patience? And now let's turn our focus to Central America. That's where one of the world's largest traffic jams is taking place, though it's not the usual type of blockage. It's a traffic jam in the sea. More than 100 ships are currently stuck near Panama. The Central American nation is home to an engineering marvel, the Panama Canal. It allows ships to travel between the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, helping save billions in transport costs. But the canal has been under a lot of pressure lately. Its water sources have been drying up. This is due to a drought-like situation in Central America. It has forced canal authorities to restrict the passage of ships. So these ships have been stuck for days waiting to cross, and this delay will affect global trade. Our next report tells you more.
Do you remember the 2021 Suez Canal crisis, where hundreds of ships were stuck in a traffic jam? Billions of dollars worth of global trade ground to a halt. All because one ship accidentally blocked Egypt's Suez Canal. Well, something like that is happening again, this time in the Panama Canal. It's the canal linking the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. It passes through the Central American nation of Panama, and it's an engineering marvel. Built over 100 years ago, the canal revolutionized global trade. It allowed ships to take a shortcut through Panama instead of going all the way down to the tip of Argentina. But now this canal is facing a crisis, not because of a wayward ship like at Suez, but because of climate change. To understand this, we need to see how the Panama Canal works. This is the Panama Canal. It's about 81 kilometers long, and it works because of expert engineering. Ships enter from one of the oceans. They stop at what's known as a set of locks. These are artificial elevators that run on water. When a ship is in position, the locks are flooded, and the ships rise. Through a series of 3 locks, they rise to about 27 meters above sea level. Ships then sail across artificial lakes. After this, they are lowered again through another set of locks, bringing them to the other side of Central America. Remember, this canal was built over a century ago. That's why it's considered a wonder of engineering. Now that you know how it works, you may be able to spot the problem. The canal depends on water to raise and lower ships, and lots of it. About 200 million liters of water is used per ship passage. And not just any water, only fresh water is used. Fresh water from the artificial lakes located in between the locks.
We must remember that the big disadvantage that the Panama Canal has as a maritime route is that we operate with fresh water, while others use seawater. Every time we open the gate that leads to the sea, seawater is mixed with fresh water. And the larger the gate is, the greater the volume of salt water that enters the system.
These artificial lakes also provide drinking water to millions of people. So, what happens when there's a drought? What happens when Panama is forced to conserve water for its residents? Exactly what's happening now. The Panama Canal has restricted the number of ships allowed to cross each day. It's down to 32 ships. It used to be 36 up until June. At peak efficiency, the canal could allow 40 ships to pass every day. Because less ships are allowed to pass, we have a traffic jam forming. There have been various reports about the number of ships stuck. Some say 200, others claim around 150. The Panama Canal authorities issued a clarification yesterday. They said 131 ships were stuck, down from a peak of 165 2 weeks ago. The authorities also said that the crossing delay had reduced by 50%. Now, ships only had to wait about 10 days on an average, as the jam was actually clearing up. The monsoon has also arrived in Panama. So, it will help replenish the artificial lakes in between the canal locks. But the canal authorities are still worried, because they aren't out of hot water yet. Literally, because 2023 is an El Niño year. It's a natural weather phenomenon that occurs every few years. It heats up the oceans and causes water bodies to evaporate. This year's El Niño is expected to be worse than usual because of the effects of climate change.
This year, 2023, as a result of this anomaly in the temperature of the Pacific, evaporation has increased a lot. And what happens? As a result of this active event, this El Niño event, the rainy season started late and weak, if we can call it that. And we are expecting the 2023 El Niño to become much more severe by the end of the year. So that scenario looks pretty grey.
The restrictions to the number of ships passing will remain, possibly till September 2024. So, to avoid traffic jams, shipping companies may need to look at alternative routes. But this would mean huge losses for Panama.
In terms of tolls alone, the water shortage will cost $200 million. We have to find other solutions to remain a relevant route for international trade. If we don't adapt, we are going to die.
Panama's authorities think it's time for change, that the over-century-old engineering marvel needs to adapt to climate change. If not, the global climate crisis will claim the Panama Canal among its victims.
The elephant. It is a widely recognized symbol of the Republican Party. But at the first US presidential debate, there was only one elephant in the room: Donald Trump, the one who did not show up. On Wednesday, 8 Republican candidates took the stage, including Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, former Vice President Mike Pence, businessman Vivek Ramaswamy, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, and others. This was the first Republican presidential debate of the season, so obviously there were some fireworks. The candidates sparred, they exchanged blows, they slammed Biden and the Democrats, they debated abortion and aid to Ukraine.
This is disastrous that we are protecting against an invasion across somebody else's border when we should use those same military resources to prevent across the invasion of our own southern border here in the United States.
All in all, it was perfect television. But was America tuning in? Not really. You see, these 8 people may have been on stage, but the spotlight was still stolen by Donald Trump. The former president boycotted the showdown. Instead, he chose to do an interview. So why was he not on stage? Because Trump does not think it is necessary. He believes he's miles ahead of all candidates. And while Trump may have been absent, it was all that the candidates talked about.
If former President Trump is convicted in a court of law, would you still support him as your party's choice? Please raise your hand if you would.
So Trump, the ultimate showman, was not there. But was this debate a snooze fest? Well, nowhere near it. There were heated exchanges. Some stood out, others got drowned in the noise. But if the debate was to be judged on applause alone, Vivek Ramaswamy won hands down. 3 months ago, this US billionaire was a nobody. Now he's the second GOP favorite. This is a man who has never run for public office. But he completely dominated the debate. Trump's absence, in fact, helped him. He got the loudest cheers, he got attacked the most, and seemed to be enjoying the spotlight quite a bit.
Let us be honest as Republicans. I'm the only person on the stage who isn't bought and paid for, so I can say this. The climate change agenda is a hoax.
Hold on. I've had enough. I've had enough.
What about the others, especially the experienced Republicans? Former Vice President Mike Pence got some cheers. His campaign may not be getting traction, but he still seemed to have some fight left in him. Of course, his experience helped. Mike Pence is no stranger to Republican debates, and that gave him an upper hand. He took a swipe at Vivek Ramaswamy. He called for nationwide abortion limits, and when asked about the Capitol riots, he said he put the Constitution first.
I think the American people deserve to know whether everyone on this stage agrees that I kept my oath to the Constitution that day.
Nikki Haley was the only woman in the room. She too fought it out and even quoted Margaret Thatcher in the process.
This is exactly why Margaret Thatcher said, if you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman.
So Ramaswamy, Pence and Haley shone bright. What about Ron DeSantis? At the beginning of this year, the Republican race was a two-man contest, Donald Trump versus Ron DeSantis. But the Florida governor has since tanked. DeSantis tried to fight back on stage, but without Trump, he was merely shadow boxing. None of his hits actually landed.
Here's the thing. This election is not about January 6th of 2021. It's about January 20th of 2025, when the next president is going to take office.
Will this debate change the Republican field? Well, it's highly unlikely. Trump is still riding high on the polls, but the second place is still up for a toss. There was a tie between Vivek Ramaswamy and Ron DeSantis, but after the debate that we saw, Ramaswamy seems to be soaring high. Many even called it the Vivek show. Will that be enough for him to take on Trump, though? He may not have that much political clout, and honestly, he may not even want to. But as an outsider, he has established one thing, that he is here to stay in the race. As for Donald Trump, he won it without fighting it. His influence seemed everywhere, even the clothes that the candidates wore on stage. All 7 male candidates lined up wearing dark suits, white shirts, and red ties, an echo of Trump's standard attire. It goes on to show that even when Trump is absent, his presence still looms large over the Republican Party. Our next story also comes from the US, where about 20 years ago, a woman named Anne suffered a stroke. She became severely paralyzed. She lost the ability to speak, but now she can talk simply by thinking. All thanks to artificial intelligence. It has created her digital avatar. AI translates Anne's brain signals into speech and facial expressions of the avatar. It even speaks with her voice. This is being hailed as a huge advance. Nothing like this has ever been done before. So how does it work? Also, could this help transform the lives of people who have lost their ability to speak? Our next report tells you.
This is Anne, a 47-year-old American woman. 18 years ago, she suffered a stroke. It severely paralyzed her. She lost her ability to speak. She can't type either, so she normally communicates with a speech synthesizer, a terribly slow machine used by many like her. How does it work? Patients spell out words using eye or facial movements. The machine tracks this and selects letters quite slowly, making about 14 words per minute. This can be frustrating and makes natural conversation impossible. But now, thanks to artificial intelligence, Anne is able to speak through a digital avatar. AI translates her brain signals into speech and facial expressions. It even speaks in her own voice.
Anything is possible. I think you are wonderful.
Quite the mind reader, right? This is a big breakthrough. So, how did it work? A team of doctors implanted a credit card-sized rectangle of electrodes on the surface of Anne's brain. These electrodes intercepted the brain signals. Brain signals are what control our facial movements. So, what happened in Anne's case? The electrodes helped translate these brain signals into a digital avatar, which smiles and frowns the way Anne would. It also talks like her.
So we decoded text. So, just the message of what they were trying to say. We also directly decoded sound. So, the sound of what they're trying to say. And then we actually also decoded facial movements to animate an avatar. So kind of a 3D representation of our participant so that you can kind of see them attempting to communicate. So we have these three modalities that we were able to successfully decode from brain activity using these neural recordings.
This is a major scientific advancement. Experts say it could help transform the lives of thousands who have lost their ability to speak due to strokes or a nervous system disease like ALS. Globally, 1 in 4 adults are likely to suffer a stroke. It is the leading cause of disability. And for every 100,000 people, about 5 people develop ALS, the world over. It sounds like a small number, but some who suffer from it may lose their voice permanently. And for such patients, AI can be a boon. Now, this is a novel tech, so it isn't perfect yet. It decodes words incorrectly 28% of the time. It generates about 78 words a minute. That's less than the 110 words usually spoken in natural conversations, but much more than the 14 words a minute spoken by other speech synthesizers. Also, the technology cannot be practically used by patients yet. One needs a team of researchers to operate it.
What we see now is a Ferrari engine without a car around it. It's the research team that accommodates the whole process. But without the research team, it's not going to work. You can't take it home or anything.
But this is a watershed moment. If successful, it could lead to a wireless device that is directly implanted inside the skull and lets patients independently control their devices. Research is still underway, but if successful, this tech could recreate voices that were otherwise lost.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story, starting with South Africa. Something really fishy happened with Chinese President Xi Jinping and his aide. It is just as funny as it is suspicious. Xi's aide was blocked from entering a venue, almost manhandled. A dramatic rescue operation was launched to evacuate those stuck in a flood-hit region. And Saudi Arabia witnessed a fierce storm. Its iconic clock tower overlooking the Kaaba in Mecca was hit by lightning. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1991, Ukraine officially declared itself an independent country. Ukraine said that it would no longer follow the laws set by the USSR. Eventually, in December, voters approved a referendum formalizing Ukraine's independence. We're leaving you with that. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.